I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and welcome to night one of the 2024 ChemKnits Chanukah special! Every night of Chanukah this year, there will be a new yarn dyeing video featuring a variety of different techniques, and some of you may have mini skeins at home that you can unwrap while watching these videos. This year, I want to kick things off with something a little bit silly. A big yarn lasagna. Now, this is a term that actually you guys coined, where I did a technique of layering yarn and dye with more yarn and more dye and more yarn and more dye all in one pan to then heat set. And it allows me to process things really quickly. But what would happen if I add a different color on each layer? And specifically, what would happen if I try to use all the colors in the rainbow, each on a different layer of a yarn lasagna? Would this work? I don't know. All the colors could blend together, or we could end up with a variation of color and blending as we go through the layers. I have no idea what's about to happen, and well, the anticipation is killing me, so let's go jump into it. So when I'm thinking about this lasagna and potentially having 130 10-gram mini skeins all in one pan, there is a question about whether or not all the yarn will fit in one pan. Certainly, I would not want to heat it on the stove with that much yarn in the pan because I think things would be too compressed. But maybe we'll set this all up in one pan and then remove half of the yarn into a second pan for the actual heat setting. Another option would be to do, say, like the red, orange, yellow layers, stop, and then do yellow, green, blue, purple or something and stop somewhere in the middle. Or to do the green likely is going to spread. So we could do green, blue, purple in one and then the other 4 layers in another. It wouldn't be all one, but I guess first we should see if the yarn all fits in a pan. I pre-soaked all the yarn overnight, and the yarn is Wool to Dye Force Platinum Sock and Platinum DK, which is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. I don't know, we have 900 grams in here right now, and we will need to have water and stuff too. I mean, this is cutting it a little close. Okay, skein 13. So part of what the lasagna technique requires is that you add water more and more so that way you can press and squish and move things through. And so while all of this technically fits, there's not a lot of space here for a lot of water, and so it would be hard to move the dyes through. What I don't know is if I can reasonably do this in layers using 100 grams of yarn in each layer. Because see here, the issue is I can't spread this out quite enough. With 200 grams of yarn, I can spread things more so we have a full complete layer. So then when we add more liquid, it's not going to go to the side. And so my concern is if I'm only doing 100 grams of yarn, I'd have to move it on the previous layer a lot to get it spread. But then you see how the coverage isn't quite as good or as deep. So, gosh, I'm thinking that I'm going to need to divide things up, which is a little bit of a bummer. But I really just need a smaller container. Because if I had like a half size pan, even with it scrunched up, then I could fit this. But then I don't think I'd be able to fit 6 skeins. So there are downsides. So this is a fun idea. One that we'll still continue with, but we're gonna have to divide the rainbow in half because I think that that's just the way it's gonna need to work. I'm forming a new plan because I feel like I can do 800 grams of yarn in a pan reasonably. And so if I add 3 more skeins of yarn, so let's say we'll grab 3 full skeins of sock yarn to include that I'll go pre-soak. Then we can do one that is red through green and the other that is yellow through purple. And so with 800 grams of yarn in each pan, we can do one pan that is red through green and the other that is yellow through purple. And so this gives each pan the opportunity to have things blend in an odd way. I don't think things will blend in an odd way and everything will turn brown, but we might see some browns. But that sort of evens the playing field a lot. And yes, This is going to give us more in this yellow-green area. But given that green is such a big spreader, I think that having this in both means that that'll blend our rainbow together a little bit. I'm gonna go pre-soak 300 grams of Knit Pick Stroll Fingering Weight yarn, which is also 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. And I'm gonna pre-soak it in plain tap water as well. If you wanna learn more about the tools and equipment, I'll have links and affiliate links down in the video description. I'm also gonna go pre-soak some 20 gram mini skeins of the Platinum DK and Platinum sock that we'll use as yarn mops throughout this project. And I have another fun bonus colorway idea that we might dye up as well. I made a plan with how I am going to arrange the colors in the 8 layers. We'll have one set of the fingering weight sock mini skeins on every single layer, and then either the full skeins, which are mostly going to be on the green and yellow because of repeats, but then DK will get some of just about every color. Speaking of colors, now I need to go pick them. Here are the rainbow colors that we plan to use today. These are all Dharma acid dyes, and we have Fire Engine Red, Blazing Orange, Brilliant Yellow, Emerald Green, Sapphire Blue, and Royal Purple. I believe, although I may have picked the wrong blue, but I believe our blue, red, and yellow are all primaries. But either way, we should be able to get a very pretty rainbow with this set. I just don't know how they're all gonna blend together, or if they'll all blend together. Normally in the lasagna layering technique, I like to do this to try to get a variegated colorway and have multiple skeins with the same colorway. But this is something that's been in my brain, and I thought it would be fun to just try. And sometimes I might start with some dye on the very bottom, but with the mini skeins, I'm not gonna do that today. They're harder to flip over, and the minis can sort of shift relative to one another. So I'm gonna spread it out. We're gonna do our red, work it through, and then we'll decide if we're gonna add a little bit more dye before adding the next layer on. But the other key thing here, as I pour some water on, because we want there to be enough water so that way we can squish things well, but we don't want too much water so that way the yarn isn't at the surface anymore. And let's see, I've probably added 4.5 to 5 cups of water, and we'll be adding water with each layer. But now I need to go put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves so we can start working with the dry dye powder. And again, there's no acid in here. There's no acid on our yarn mop, which is just off to the side. But Fire Engine Red is not a color I've used a lot because I think the last batch, there was something off with it that was a note on the Dharma website. And so I thought it'd be fun to use this again. I've used the Jacquard Fire Red a bit more. Now I'm sprinkling the dye on to spread it out because we don't want the dye to clump. We don't want that at all. But now I'll put the lid on the container and we'll start working this through. And we'll decide if we want to add more or what. But the key is when we go into the dye containers, we're gonna want to make sure our hands are dry. Now, it's possible that we'll get some dyes up on the walls of the container, and it's also possible that we could end up with some speckles or some white patches, but we're gonna attempt to work the colors through. Now, before I go dry my hands, this is where the yarn mop comes in. But this is a color that has seemed to develop a little bit over time because when I first started pushing it through, it looked pale. And now, again, I went for the wrong container. But you can see when I press that it hasn't all struck to the yarn. There are colors that even with no acid, I will see start to bind to the yarn right away. And we'll know a little bit about how each color is behaving once we add the second layer of yarn on top. But I found, yeah, because see, when I push this in, it kind of disappears at first. Some reds I've noticed do that. I think Chinese red, which I haven't used a lot, is another one that disappears, but then with heat and acid comes back a little bit more. I'm not sure how, quote, red we're gonna get things here because I feel like I've added a lot of dye. And at this stage I can lift, yeah, it's gone all the way through.
so I don't really know what to expect. Okay, but we can do, I mean, we know there's a lot of red in the liquid still because we can see it when I push. But sometimes, and I don't do this with every color, I like to go in and add, this time I'm just going to do a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of dye powder before we bring the next layer in. And what this will do is sort of ensure that the next layer gets some of the previous color. How much? That I don't know. And then I could either tap my fingers in there or put that on the yarn mop to just remove some of that color. Okay, and now we need to do our next layer, which I'm going to do one at a time to try to spread things out. Now the mini skeins are short enough that they don't really need to be scrunched very much, and since we're doing one color on each layer, I have less of an issue of picking up and moving the yarn at any stage, because if it was variegated then I might not want to do it because I might not want to blend the colors side to side, but here it's a little less of a big deal. And so as we press, you can see that our color is definitely lighter than what we had down below, but we still have a lot of that red coming through. What's interesting to me and about doing one color on each layer is, I wonder if we'll get a lot of variation of color or if things are going to feel tonal or what. What I am going to do is add a little bit more water, and then we're going to come in with our blazing orange dye. Oh man, because I've never done this with all one color before. The last time I did this, I think I did like blue, yellow, and like red, pink, but I still varied it with 3 colors across the way. So I am extraordinarily curious about what we may see. Now see, this time with the orange, I'm not wiping the dye off of my fingertips because I'm bringing this in here. And the blazing orange is another color that is seeming like it's just disappearing on me. What? I don't see it at all. Oh dear. I feel like if I wait a minute, maybe that'll come back. But, oh no. Disappearing dye. Maybe I'm just adding like way less than I thought. I really hope I don't overdo it. It'll be funny if the whole pan ends up being one color. Okay, let's bring in more of the orange. I'm like, what is going on? But I've also had it happen, like, shoot, what's the hyacinth? Is one of those colors that disappears when you add it at first, and then with the heat it comes back, and I had a big surprise moment with that color once because I was expecting there to be some change, and then I didn't. But I am not... What? Like, is this changing at all? Like, I am so confused. Oh my gosh. Okay, I mean, because blazing orange is very orange. Maybe it's just that there's so much red that we're just not seeing it, which, you know, is okay. But I don't really want to add too much more. Things look a little tomato red now, but I am going to add more before we do the yellow layer. But what? And I'm going a little bit heavier. You guys, we could end up with something that I completely did not expect. And that would be okay. Because, all right, with the yarn mop, see some of that tone of the orange? I'm gonna come in with our fingering weight yarn, move some of that down, and then the DK. Okay, I am so confused and perplexed. Okay, you know what? This is looking more orange to me than the other layers. maybe. Maybe. But you can see that the bottom side, just from where I peeked, is deeper in color than the top side because we put that on top of the dye. And there's still color in the liquid. So when I add the yellow, the color is going to be like quite orangey. But man, I don't know what's going to happen. What I do know is that I need to add more water. And I'm going to go ahead and give this like a good little push before I start bringing in the yellow dye, just to help things move around a little bit. Brilliant yellow. My hand is still a little wet. Brilliant yellow is a color that from some other yarn mops I've done, I haven't added a color on top because I found that it could be very potent. But I think we want it to be a little potent, and I'm curious, again, if everything's going to feel like the same color, how much variation will we see? And I have a feeling that this is a colorway that if you open it up before watching the video, you aren't going to know what I did. Oh. But you will, okay, so see the yellow, there's no question that things have shifted to be more golden. It's still very, very orange. But now you can see why I'm planning on adding green and yellow in each pan. Because right now, I mean, we're getting a really pretty fade set, which, I mean, if this works super well, maybe this will have to be featured in SMSMS at some point. But the problem with doing this and changing the color up on every level is that we just don't know exactly what's going to happen. I'm debating if I should do 2 rounds of the yellow because I did that with the other colors. And certainly because this layer isn't going to feel super yellow because the orange and red are making such an impact, maybe I should do 2. So right now, I'm not pushing that hard. I'm pushing really shallowly. There's a clump. I'm sort of dissolving that on my fingers. Because if clumps remain, then that could result in some color bleeding. Now over at these edges, I'm definitely having to press more. And the color of the water is fairly orange. But there might be some little amounts of variation that we see, but we won't know until we remove skeins. See, now this layer is giving me what I expected the last layer to give me, but you never know, which is why I'm like, ooh, doing this lasagna with like red, orange, and yellow could be really pretty. Maybe with like a pink in the middle. Although reds have more yellows to it than pinks, so maybe like magenta, red, orange, yellow. Look at me planning ahead. Oh man, okay. Our yarn mop has a ton of color on it right now. I'm planning on using a separate mop for the second pan, if you're curious. Okay, now from here, we'll bring in 1 skein of mini skeins. Okay. And then 1 full skein, and the full skeins are longer. So what I do sometimes is sort of start it in the middle, so then I can scrunch it on. But again, this time it doesn't matter if I move it as much because it's all the same color. Ooh, okay, editing Rebecca, take note, because I think that this could be done for a really pretty fade set. Especially because look at how much more golden it is at this point. We're getting less of the orange. But now we're about to add green. And I'm a little nervous. Oh, I'm nervous. Because I think we have something that is so cool right now. Oh no, should I skip the green? Okay, I'm gonna add some more, fill up my container with water and think. Because this is so pretty. Oh dear, I think I have to change my plan. Because I know that emerald green and royal purple blend beautifully. Because I feel like in the next pan I could still start yellow and then green and then do the other one and just have the yellow be the one. Oh, you guys, I'm so torn. I'm gonna step aside a minute and think.
I can't do it. I think that if this were not so subtle, like the shifts in here are so subtle that I am dying, to know what it looks like. And so if the orange had felt like more than the red, let's add 6 tablespoons of white vinegar. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If it had felt like that when I was doing this, that there was more contrast between each of the layers we had in here, then I would have no problem adding the green on as planned. But the colors had such a soft, subtle transition between each of them that I can't bring myself to do it. I just can't. Now the question is, I didn't add any dye on top. Should I add yellow again? No, I'm just gonna leave it because look at all that yellow coming through. We had yellow below and moved it, and I don't think, because like peeking down, oh my gosh, peeking down we have the most beautiful little gradient that is smooth, and I am floored right now. I am floored that I can't bring myself to change this. Oh my goodness. But check out our yarn mops. That's so pretty. I'm gonna let this sit. Oftentimes I don't want to move it because I don't want to like shift and blend the colors. That isn't as much of a concern here right now, but I still think I'm gonna let it sit for 30 minutes and then we'll come back, add more water, and go start heating it up. I don't know if waiting 30 minutes is really necessary, but sometimes you worry about like if you tip then the water moves, and so it's something that I tend to do. Remember when I said some colors develop with acid? Okay, I'm gonna add some more water. Now this is a mixture that originally was 8 cups of water with 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, and I have about 3 cups of it. So I'm just gonna pour it in, and I'm gonna also just add a little bit of some plain water just to increase the water level here. And I'm coming in and giving everything a good shimmy. There's still, I think mostly just yellow left in here, but now the yarn is a little bit less compressed. And so I can take it to the stove and start heating it up. I've been second guessing myself a lot today for tons of things, but I am happy that I decided to leave this as is, especially with how orange this turned. I have a feeling that both the red and the orange developed more. I'm hoping that we'll see a lot of color down below. And I knew the yellow would get overtaken. Like, I think that when we do our next pan, we'll start with yellow at the bottom. That's gonna become way more green because the green is gonna spread a lot. But the difference here is that I know that the emerald green and royal purple blend into a beautiful color. So if that carries all the way through, I don't think we're gonna end up with an ugly color for anyone. Even though I know orange is one of people's least favorite colors, at least we're having something fun come out of the pan. Yes, if this is something that you want to see me do again and pull the trigger on mixing the orange and the green, basically, let me know and I'll do a video where I use emerald green and blazing orange. We'll use the two together and just see what we get. We'll mix them and blend them on purpose, because then I might feel less nervous about doing that in the future. You know, I never thought about this as a method for making tonals. The color has almost completely cleared. It hasn't quite been 30 full minutes yet, but I can't help it but check. And the color deepens, but I think we got a lot of orange, everyone. I'm curious how much variation there will be. There's some really pretty variation looking like it's happening up there. But it's pretty amazing how much the colors start to stick to the yarn without adding acid. This is gonna finish heating. I let it heat up for 15-20 minutes and then set a timer for 30 minutes. So it'll have had 30 minutes of full heat. Once the timer goes off, I'll turn off the heat and let the yarn cool off in the pan for a while, so that way I can comfortably handle it. With our second pan, even though I'm expecting there to be a lot more contrast, I decided to film this as a time lapse with a voiceover because I'm not sure how long the editing's going to be. But I know that the shifts that I'm anticipating here are going to be a little bit more dramatic than what we saw in the other pan, which may end up being all orange for all I know, or it could be more subtle. I started in a very similar way, adding a layer of 200 grams of yarn, then some water, then our yellow dye, new layer of yarn, then green, new layer blue, new layer purple. There were no real surprises going from the yellow to the green to the blue. Although the sapphire blue did hold up against the green better than I could have anticipated. I don't know, I'm so used to the emerald green overtaking everything that when adding the blue, which I did have to do a whole second layer because at first it was very, very teal, but I was still impressed that when I laid the yarn on top of the blue layer, that things felt more ocean blue compared to more green. And it really makes me want to do a colorway that is maybe 80% sapphire blue, 20% emerald green. I think that color would be stunning. But anyway, I then felt super confident adding in the purple because I knew it wasn't going to be a huge jump from that blue to the purple. Even if we have some other greens and yellows in the middle, I knew that it would work and layer really well. Because again, I've combined the emerald green and royal purple before and it breaks spectacularly. And the color from just the combination is also a really lovely color. And so I know that we're not just mixing the purple with the yellow, and if things still looked really yellow here, I would be much more nervous about adding purple on next. Yeah, I think that this pan is gonna be very different from the other one. But again, things could have blended a lot more and we could end up with something very teal or blue leaning when we open it up. We don't really know. All right, let's add acid. I'm gonna start with 6 tablespoons of white vinegar, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we're gonna work this through. Now, I will want to add more water and probably some more acid like last time, even though we do have a fair amount of water here. The color is very purple and I have no idea how far down this is going. Like we see a hint of some greens up here, but I don't know if this is going all the way down to the bottom. Certainly the color is feeling more like indigo or iris up here, but that's because we had a lot of blue. I'm seeing some really, really pretty, like gradient-y things happening towards the ends that I am extremely excited about. But I think now let's go ahead and wait for 30 minutes before I bring this over to the stove. It's been 30 minutes and here I have 4 cups of water with 3 tablespoons of white vinegar in it. And I'm adding that on. Some of this coloration down here, oh my gosh, I peeked. Some of these colors are so pretty. I have no idea how much blending we have. Actually though, look at how much lighter the water is. I think that just with acid, a lot of stuff struck. But when I push, I do maybe see some green. So we'll see. We'll see. Ooh, we got a little dye up there. All right, let me wash my hands. And I'll bring this over to the stove and start heating it up. And once it gets hot, we'll heat for 30 minutes. Now, as for these yarn mops, the purple really didn't make a huge impact over here. The green really did dominate this. So I'm just taking this Pasteur pipette and I'm adding some acid on to each. And don't worry, I'll squish it through. But eventually I will steam set all of this yarn in a steamer basket on the stove for at least 30 minutes. And I'll try to separate them so that way we don't have color transfer from one to the other. You can see, even squeezing it, there's a little bit of color left, but not much. And actually, not much is coming off of my gloves. It's amazing what can happen with no acid. I mean, my tap water is slightly acidic, but anyway, we'll steam set all that, wash it off camera, and I'll show it to you with the conclusions. This pan is cooled off for maybe around an hour or so. I saw a little bit of dye up there, but I think I can now remove the yarn comfortably. So let's start peeling back our layers. This is no longer very golden, it's quite orange. I'm curious if we'll be able to tell the difference between the layers once things are dry. But, ooh, look, we do have some golden to some orange variation in that layer. That's fun. It's a little warmer than I thought. Okay, let's see. Okay, we've got some nice variation in here as well, but I'd say we're very, very orange. And I can't tell if things are shifting. Certainly, there's less gold in that second layer than there was in the first. You know what? We are getting redder. Okay, it's still very orange, but I see hints of some like red and pink tones in here. Of course, and like I'm definitely seeing more pink and red in here, even though it's very orange. Now, will I be able to tell the difference between all of these sets in the end? That's to be determined, but we do have a bit of a gradient here, even if it's extremely subtle. So I'm pleased that we have some differences in here. Oh man. Let's remove this yarn. I am so excited because I see those greens peeking up there. All right, let's see. Ooh, look at how peacock that area is right there. Ooh, I can't tell if this area beneath is more blue or if it has these like neutral purpley vibe. Ooh. Oh, that's cool. So this is a little bit more what I was anticipating we might see on the other side, that we might get some sections where we feel some of the color come through in some areas, but not others. Because this is now getting more green. And for all I said that this could be fun to do, ooh, for a spring mini skein mini series kind of thing, I think that this is going to show all of us right now that it's really hard to predict what colors will go through easier and which ones won't, because we're seeing like these ones don't feel as tonal as the others do. And I guess there were some areas where I was pushing things down at a surface level, but at some point I think I was pushing hard on everything. So I don't entirely know. But certainly what we have here is more of a progression than what we saw with our oranges. That was way more subtle. So I could see myself, if I was going to try to do a set, maybe do 2 levels of yellow, then the green, then the blue, then the purple, because then maybe we would end up with something even more yellow at the bottom. But for all I say that, there's another video in this series where I'm trying to dye the same colorway in multiple batches, and my results weren't that reproducible. So we might get this exact same result, we might not. And so that is a reason to always, I guess, keep in mind when you do something that is it's a little bit random. And I think that the lasagna technique is best for when you want to do the same colorway over and over versus try to vary it. Certainly though, this is fun, and if you really want me to try this again, then I certainly could. But anyway, I'm gonna let this cool completely. I'll probably wash these ones off camera, but I'll pop in if I notice bleeding, because we do have a green in here that could bleed. But let's go wash our orange yarn. There's one more project I wanted to do. So I put on my deluxe rubber respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves, and grabbed these tiny scoops that I have that are, I think, 1/32nd of a teaspoon. And I measured out that little bit of each of the 6 colors into their own cup and dissolved the dye in some hot tap water. My plan is to layer these colors together on 200 grams of yarn. And I'm not expecting the color to be that dark, but it also shouldn't be that pastel overall. The yarn I'm using are the 20-gram mini skeins because I'm really just curious about what we would get with a approximate 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, I don't know how many ones I just said, ratio of all of the colors. So in one of the leftover dye baths, I added the red dye, stirred it up, added the yarn, let that all strike, or most of it strike, remove the yarn, added the orange, and rinse, repeat. Because I really just wanted to see what these colors would look like all layered together versus blending the colors together first and then dyeing the yarn. When I layered the green on top of our building orange colorway, things got a lot more fall and a lot more muted because effectively we were adding blue to orange, opposite ends of the color wheel, they're gonna make themselves more neutral. And things stayed in this very fall family as I added the blue, which had not a ton of impact, and the purple, which had a bit more, but sort of brought things, I don't know, it tempered it a little bit. But the green and the orange still seem to be a little dominant. Although we'll see how everything looks once we go ahead and see the dry yarn. I let everything heat for 30 minutes. Then I removed the yarn, set it aside to cool, and washed it off camera. Let's start washing our yarn. I feel like, is this a batch? Yeah, okay, we've got 1 full skein and 3 sets of minis here. And I always like to readjust the zip ties because sometimes if there's some powder on it, it just helps expose things. I'm super curious once all the yarn is dry if I'm going to be able to lay things out so that way we can tell the order of everything. But there's definitely going to be a gap between the first pan and the second pan because going from orange to green / blue is going to have a little of something. But the good news is, at least with the orange, we're not seeing any color bleeding. I think I will go ahead and wash one of our green pans on camera so that way you can see that too. But I'm feeling awesome about the orange, and again, I'm trying to make sure to rinse those zip ties because you don't want any powder that was stuck on them involved, and so always rinse them when you're washing your yarn. Let's go get the green. I mean, maybe I should be calling it the peacock pan instead of the green pan, but what have ya. Oh man. The zip ties didn't get that much color on them, but I was trying to be very careful with the placement of everything. Okay. So far, so good. One little snip of a tie came out, but that is not unreasonable. Oh my gosh, this color here, the peacock blue with bits of the green and purple is so unbelievably pretty that, I mean, it's not an unexpected color combination, right? Emerald, sapphire, and royal purple. But I want to play with it more because I really like it. Let's see. I mean, there's maybe a super tiny hint of some blue coming out, but I'm not really seeing much. We'll see what happens after this next rinse. Okay. I am so looking forward to hearing which pan you guys like better, and I hope if you prefer the like purpley green pan, I'm not seeing any bleeding by the way, I hope that you're not disappointed if you open up an orange skein. But anyway, into the spin dryer, and then I'll hang everything to dry. Here is our color progression from our first pan and then our second pan. The average colors seem to lean very orange, which makes sense. The first pan had red, orange, and yellow in it. And then the second pan averages very blue almost, which is a little more surprising, but there's a lot of like green teal elements in there until maybe the very last one. And I have all the yarn set up so that way the bottom of our pan is here and the top of our pan is over there. Now, what would have happened if we had all of these colors together in one pan? Well, that really comes down to yellow, green, and orange would combine with one another. Maybe a thing to play around with would be, say, 2 parts yellow, 1 part green, 1 part orange to get a feel. But there definitely is a disconnect in the middle. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened if it was all one pan. I am glad though that we sort of separated things because I think we have a full color story here and a full color story here. It's just going to be a huge surprise when everyone opens up tonight. And actually with 8 colors, this looks like a beautiful menorah, doesn't it? Imagine all these as candles. Now on 2 sets of our Leave No Dye Behind skeins, I layered all 6 colors on top of each other, one at a time. And this color here is a little hard to define. It is extremely neutral. Mostly maybe army green related, but there are purple notes, blue notes, green notes, even some like more orange notes in here. As far as like a layered tonal goes, it's very beautiful. I'm curious what would happen if I pumped up the volume and increased, maybe even doubled the amount of dye. If that is something that you would like me to do in Dye Pot Weekly and use, again, double the amount of dye that I used I think just 1 scoop of each color this time, let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Meanwhile, our other mops really are a blend of the 2 pans. All these minis right here are the sock minis. I twisted the DK ones up already and they look very similar. I'm gonna twist these ones up so we can see them in our sort of color progression. But first, I wanna just show quickly the full skeins that we got from 3 different layers. And they go pretty well. I would say that there's a little bit more variation of some of these from like the first and second layer compared to the minis. The orange one looks similar though. But anyway, let's go twist things up. Here I've just arranged 3 minis from each of the various sets. And this looks so pretty. I actually don't mind the abrupt shift between the orange and the green. But I do think I was talking about earlier how there could be something fun about making a fade set with this kind of lasagna technique and changing the color every round. And here we are with just 1 mini from each layer. I think that we have some beautiful shifts, whether it's more subtle on the oranges or we have more variation, a little bit more variegated yarn with the second pan. But not knowing what to expect could make the whole process nerve-wracking. And I'm not sure about the reproducibility. I don't know if I could get the results from the first 4 or the second 4 again on purpose. Because depending on how much of the powders I add for the next layer and how hard I push to mix the colors, we could have more even color or less even color. And for that, I don't think I'd play around with this technique for the spring, summer, mini skein mini series. But I am interested playing around with it more in the future. Just on a more, I wonder what we'd get versus trying to get a fade set. Because maybe it could end up feeling really, really subtle or really dramatic. And so, yeah, I think that that's just what's floating around in my brain. You know, I had all the minis very neatly arranged and I just intentionally jumbled them up. This way things will be a little bit more random once I go ahead and start wrapping them to put into the Chanukah samplers. And I have to say, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with color progressions moving forward and how I'm going to tie this in with everything, although I do have some ideas. But I do think it's fun when I don't know exactly what you're going to see when you open your package because there's going to be some variation in there between what people get. If you have a Chanukah sampler at home, which pan did yours come from? Did you get a warm toned orange themed mini or a cooler toned blue, green, maybe some purple in it mini. I really hope that you're not disappointed with the one you open up, and I promise that either way your yarn will tie in with colors that will be coming up in this year's sampler. Now, the Chanukah yarn samplers aren't intended to be any kind of fade set, but I do try to arrange the colors in a way that makes sense, because I know some people will use each color in the order that they appear for a project. If you were curious, I did end up keeping one of the greenish ones for myself, but I actually really wanted to keep one of each, but I didn't have enough minis to do that because some of them need to go in samplers that'll be shipped out. I am very intrigued about doing this again though. Now, there is still some Chanukah yarn in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. There may still be some samplers that are available in fingering or DK weight. You have 100 grams of mini skeins that are wrapped so you can reveal the colorways to yourselves while watching a video, or you can go back and watch the videos again after Chanukah is over. And there are some bonus full skeins, either from one of the individual nights or from the bonus videos that'll come out after the 8th night of Chanukah. And at the very end of the series, there'll be a vlog where I'll take you behind the scenes to everything going into the whole everything of the Chanukah special. So please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. So what do you think will happen for night 2? I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'll see you tomorrow night. Thank you so much for watching.